Okay, so hi everybody, and it's not going to be a very long talk today. I was trying to think a little bit of what you guys would like to hear and maybe talk about, so it's fairly informal. If you've got any questions throughout, you can just butt in and ask. I'm sure you will, some of you. And I thought normally I would talk a lot about comp flying and comp tactics and stuff like that, but maybe that's not so relevant today, but we can touch on that if some of you have some more specific questions on that. So pretty much I thought I'd try and tailor it more towards flying in Britain and tell you a bit of my ideas and what I kind of refined in my own schedule for planning for the cross-country flights this year, and then some little tactics that I picked up and played with while flying XC in Britain, because it's a little bit different to a lot of other countries, I think, for XC flying. And then at the end, just some general little tips and stuff that I think are quite useful. Maybe you probably already know most of them, stuff like that. And then we'll just open up for questions as you like, if that sounds good. So just a quick bit about myself. 14 years flying paragliders. I was a test pilot and assistant designer at Gym Gliders for 7 years until last winter. My passion has been mainly competitions, and since I was testing a lot in Korea, we were mainly just test flying, and then on my spare time I went to competitions. So cross-country flying had taken a backseat for a long time, so when I came back last winter and started to fly XC in Britain properly, like my first proper season, let's say, and really enjoyed it, then I started to see that it's actually one of the best places to fly in the world, I think. And yeah, so I don't know if any of you can perhaps guess the brand of this glider. Ken?
It's Jim, isn't it?
No, not this one.
Oh, is it? It's got funny wingtips, hasn't it?
This is a 3X flare.
3X?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I know.
Yeah, the little tips.
I'm not that old.
So that was my first wing, anyway.
Oh,
This is some flying site in Wales.
Does 3X still count?
No.
No, I don't think so.
So let's start off with the planning. So I don't know about you guys, but myself, I start planning for a cross-country day. I'm always checking, every day checking the weather, probably like everybody else. And then I get really serious about it maybe 2 days, but normally the day before. I should put in the caveat now that I didn't have a job all year, so I was flying whenever it was possible. Yeah, so sorry about that. But so I was basically just always watching the weather, and like everybody else, probably the main sites I was using, I really relied on RASP a lot. I know some people don't rate it as much, and it's not so great with some things. So I was looking at RASP primarily, and then obviously XC weather a little bit. I use Windy, but only for webcams. I think it's a really nice little feature that if you don't know about it, you should use it. Is just click on the webcam option, and then it's really good for sussing out in the morning, especially if you want to go to Wales. Because if you check out like the Abergavenny webcam, you might see in the morning it's completely clouded over, and that may or may not have been in the forecast. And if it's clear, then you know it's worth the drive maybe. So the webcam is a really nice feature, and if you weren't using that, I really recommend it. And then, I don't know how many of you know which website this is?
XC.
Yeah. If you don't know about it, it's probably the easiest tool, I think, to use for planning across country and setting declared flights, because it'll show you all the airspace, like you can see around Birmingham up there, so it's a little bit small, and you can set the turn points and stuff like that. And it's also really good because you can export the task or copy it and send it in a WhatsApp message or whatever, or get the QR code and scan it with the XC Track or Fly Sky High if you've got Apple. So these are the main 3 kind of websites that I'm looking at when I'm flying cross country.
When you're on RASP, what's the main thing you're looking at?
Okay, yeah, good question, Ken. So,
what's your priority?
Yeah. First, as a general overview, I will check the star rating, the general star rating.
Yeah, that's what I do first, yeah.
I don't know if anybody does anybody use the foot launch star rating?
No.
Does anybody look at that? No, because it's bollocks, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's right.
Because zero's fine,
Yeah,
and top end wind is fine as well.
Exactly.
It degrades both
yeah,
of them.
it's very strange. So never look at that. So as a general, like, is it worth looking more? Even then, if you're desperate to fly, it's still worth looking a bit more. But after the star rating, the first thing I'll check is the thermaling height, normally, and thermaling height for say 11 o'clock, because I want the day to be starting to work early if possible. And then if it's showing already a decent height by 11, then it's really worth a good day in my point of view. And then you'll obviously click through and check that through the whole day it's good. But yeah, thermally height, the general star rating, BL wind. I don't really look at the surface wind or 10-meter wind. I don't know if people like to do that, but personally, I just look at BL wind, and I've kind of gauged myself how days have been in the past where it's been, okay, well, 12 knots of BL wind is really fine. So I don't know, maybe it's the same if you look at the surface wind, as long as you set whatever you set your own kind of gauge to, if that makes sense. Yeah, those three things. I might check the rain, but RASP isn't the best for the rain. And the thermaling height will tell you a lot, like if there's going to be massive spread out, it'll normally degrade the thermaling height, so it'll give you a lot of information.
What's thermaling height based on?
I don't know, okay. But normally, if you click on the CU potential, it's not the. I think it thinks the base will be a bit higher than the thermals, but I don't know why I always look at the thermaling height. But it's just the easiest one, because if you look at the CU potential, it's going to give you gaps if there's no clouds somewhere. And it's CU potential is often, as we've seen the last few days, wrong, because there's been small cumulus popping in the afternoon that wasn't forecast. So that's about the planning timeline and the weather, and then setting tasks. How many people here actually set tasks themselves? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. And what do you think about it? Is it easy?
Well, I don't use that.
What do you use?
CU.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have much experience with that. So.
Yeah.
tend to look at it, like say, boundary layer through the day,
Yeah.
and look at whether it swings or it veers or it backs.
Ah,
as
yeah,
well
yeah.
to
For
check-
Russ, yeah.
To check where you're
Exactly.
where you're
Yeah.
likely to end up, because it's not always like that.
That's true. That's
you
true.
know,
Yeah.
if it's through the day, you have to think where you are roughly through the day. And then I turn up on the hill and say, I'm thinking so and so, and everyone goes, oh, I think it's going to be there, and I go, oh, all right then.
Yeah.
But I do like to look,
Mhm.
you know, and do something, or a triangle as well, and set, but I'll often take someone else's as well, because they might just, especially if it's wrong, because
Yeah.
he always has a good triangle.
Yeah.
That's one day.
Yeah. Well, you touched on a good point, Peggy, that it's good to bounce the ideas of other people. So a big point for the year for me was like group motivation. So if you're on your own and the weather looks 50-50 if it's going to be a nice viable day or not, and can you be asked to drive for an hour and a half to a takeoff where it might rain or it might be too windy, or we know every day is basically either better than the forecast or worse than the forecast. It's rarely that the forecast is bang on, so you're kind of taking a gamble every time, aren't you? So group motivation is key. So
Definitely.
I think I know the Malvern group is pretty active with messaging of who's flying and stuff like that, so that's really nice to see, and I just thought I'd reinforce that a little bit more. So yeah, good job. And let's move on to the main bit. So okay, we've done the boring stuff, right? So this is just talking about general flying in the UK. So we've gone through a lot of the preparation already, but really, when I'm going for a cross-country day, the cross-country turn starts as soon as you arrive on the hill. You know, as soon as I'm on the hill, you might think I'm a bit of a dick because I don't really want to talk too much to people when I'm on the hill, and that's because I'm already kind of preparing myself. You know, I'm nervous as well. I'm thinking, oh, I hope I don't bomb out. I hope I don't bomb out from takeoff. I hope I take off at the right time. You know, all these kind of things going through my head. So I'm just dead concentrated straight away. I'm on the hill, and the first thing I do every single time, before even saying hello to even my mates, is get my wing out. And if you want to improve your XV flying, I would really recommend that as the first thing to do, is to get your wing out and get clipped in and ready to fly. Don't stand around chatting and then think, oh, it looks good now, I'm going to take off. Because you've already missed a good, I would suspect, at least 20 minutes of the day by that point. Because when you eventually decide it's okay to fly, it's probably been okay to fly for some period of time before that. That's just my experience, especially on the Beacon. Because the Beacon is a very special takeoff, I would say. I would say it's even the best takeoff in my experience in Britain. Because you can take basically any wind direction as long as it's light, or stronger easterlies and westerlies. And whatever, as long as the wind is light, you can lob off over the town, and fingers crossed, it has worked every single time.
When they finish building those houses, though, it's going to spoil it a bit, isn't it? That building site.
Yeah, that building site has been quite nice. So the longer they keep doing that, the better. Yeah. But yeah, so get your kit out. And yeah, the other thing I'm thinking about is last minute task changes. So I'm sat there and I'm already watching for birds and how high they're climbing, and then also where the clouds are popping and where the clouds look good. Is it better, like especially if you can do a triangle, you've got to say, are you going to do it on the east side or the west side? Because on the west side of Beacon, the ground's like 150 meters higher, isn't it? So you've got that much less height to play with, especially early on when the base is lower. That's when it's quite tricky. But sometimes it has been better than the east side. So it's good to walk up to the top of the hill, watch over the back, where the clouds pop in first, and that might be a last minute task change to where you set your triangle. So earlier in the season, I'd set a lot of triangles, and then I get to the hill, and it seemed like there was a cloud street just lining up north-south, going all the way along the Malvern Hills and off the south end. So for earlier in the year, a lot of my triangle tasks, I would start just going south into those clouds, because it's a logical thing to do. So don't get dead set on whatever you planned the night before or in the morning on a computer. It's always open to change, and try and talk to your mates, because the more people you can convince and bend their arm to fly with you, the more likely you're going to make it, basically. Does that make sense? So next thing is fly smart, and fast or slow, and that doesn't mean just if you're mashing the bar or going on the brakes, changing your actual speed, your ground speed, whatever, your air speed, but going through the gears more like. So you're evaluating the weather and how the weather's changing, what's coming up ahead of you. Is there going to be high cloud, or is there nice clouds? And then you might want to, what I mean by, in the case of speeding up, would be perhaps leave the thermal a little bit earlier, like not going to base, because sometimes if you go all the way to base, you lose quite a bit of vision on where you are actually going to be going, because as long as you're under the cloud base, you can look up at the side of the next cloud and you can tell the health of it a lot better. Is it growing? Is it dying? What stage of the cycle is it in? But as soon as you get up to base, you can't really see the next cloud anymore. You're looking at the shadow, and you can't tell by the shadow if it's good or not. So as soon as you, emerge from get out from the edge of the cloud base, then you see the cloud, and you start evaluating, oh, I should have been going that way. And you've wasted a bit of time. So you could speed up by leaving a little bit earlier and already go into the healthy cloud, because sometimes, especially if you're climbing in a weaker climb than is the average for the day, the next cloud looks healthy, but you're like, oh no, I'm a bit concerned, I want to get as high as possible before going to the next cloud. But that time you spent in the weaker cloud, the cycle is already ending in the next cloud. It looks healthy now, but by the time you get up to base and traverse to the next one, you're too late, and that one's dying, and you're much slower than you would have been if you'd just gone. So, and then to slow down, it might be that you even go back to the, you might emerge from the edge of the cloud base and look and go, oh shit, the cloud's dying, the one that I was going for, and there's nothing else. There might be blue holes either side of what you're heading for, and that's dying, and you're going to go, oh. And if you look behind you, which you did a couple of times this season, you look behind you and what you've just come off is a really nice cloud street, and then ahead of you is dead. It's been a really good idea to actually just go back the 500 meters, back to the cloud where you were, climb up to base again, and wait on the edge of the cloud. Just kind of dip your wingtip in the cloud and wait and keep watching downwind. And when that cloud that was there dies, more than likely something else will bubble up. And even, it feels like a long time for you when you're flying the wrong way and then you're waiting. But actually, if you check your track log, you waited maybe just less than 5 minutes, and the sky downwind can completely change in that time. Because how many of you have, glided into that crappy air, where you've seen it's blue or the cloud was dying, you've landed, you packed up, and then you've looked up and you've gone, wait a minute, it looks perfect, doesn't it? Because it can change that quickly, isn't it? So it's always better to, maybe go back a little bit, take your time, slow down, and stay in the air. So I know another reason you might slow down or speed up is when you're flying with teammates, and if someone's ahead of you, you've got to be really vigilant. It's something that I try and do in my comp flying, and it applies a lot to exit flying, is that you should know where everyone who's within sight of you in the air is at all times. So you're always you've got to feel like an owl. You got to almost spin your head around to look behind you, like what's that guy doing, and then try and evaluate, because it will pull your flying on if you can evaluate what's that guy doing. Like, he's going off at a funny angle. Why is he doing that? Is he going for that cloud over there? Is he going for the tree? You've got to try and think what he's thinking and why he's doing it, or is he just a numpty? It can be the case sometimes.
He's looking at them.
But that's why observation is really important. And also, one thing that I would do on a comp takeoff that maybe is something you might want to think about is you walk around the comp takeoff and you try and say hello to the guys. Even I know in British XC you're preparing and getting your kit out early, like we suggested. But still, just to check what wings people are on. Some people change wings 3 times a year. Or
I do that all the time. I do that.
But it's always good to know who you're flying with, and you can then kind of guess what their goals are and how they're going to fly. And then another thing is that's coming from comp flying again is fly your own style. Figure out what your style is. Are you the person who will push on and make those hard decisions of you've got 2 healthy looking clouds in front of you? Are you going to go left or right, and why are you going to do that? Are you that person, or if you're not that confident in making your XC decisions and you're with other people, it's worth to make maybe 2 more turns in the climb and then start behind them, and then you just wait 50 to 100 meters behind them and pimp them.
See where they go.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
So pin off them,
Yeah, so it's good to identify your own style and be aware of it, and how that relates to your own goals and what you want to achieve. Moving on. So here's one tip that's really important for flying in Britain. Is when you see this nice cloud in front of you, which bit do you head for? Do you have any?
Dark bits.
The dead bits?
No, dark.
Oh, the dark bits, yeah. Yeah, so you'd probably end up over this side of the cloud, but would you maybe go to the right, the furthest edge, left edge there, or maybe to the centre there?
Well, there's a bit of something on the left.
Yeah, or what, this wispy?
Yeah, keep a good eye on that.
Well.
No? I mean, yeah, it could be.
Yes, it could be. If this starts dying, that might start popping.
Yeah, exactly.
But
And
the,
on
but
the
the,
right-hand
the
side.
angle on the cloud is showing, as we're looking at it, right to left. So I would end up going more centre.
More centre, you think it's kind of drifting a bit like
there's
that?
a little bit of angle on that.
Yeah, there was,
Yeah, I don't know, but this is the point. So if you've got a mate with you, it's really important that you try and hit the cloud at the same time and not stacked behind each other. So if I look behind and Wes or Kirsty is right behind me, I'll be on the radio like, what are you doing? Spread out. Because there's nothing worse than following right behind someone. Because the air is all invisible, we know that, but the more you spread out laterally, the more you can get an idea of what the air is doing, and you can watch your friend, and if they're going down, move away from them. And if they're going up relative to you, move towards them. And just do that through the whole glide, the whole transition to the next cloud. And then if they were going up, you need to get really close to them. Or maybe if they go up a lot in relation to you on the glide, you want to swap sides with them from underneath and hopefully get that good line on the other side to get equal to them. And then what's important is when you hit the cloud is that if I'm flying with Wes, I'll try and have one of us hit maybe here and one of us hit here at the same time. So you can see who gets the better climb, and then you move to there, and then collectively you move faster. So the more people you have doing that, the better. But if someone's hanging back a little, even 50 meters or 100 meters, if they stay 100 meters back, it ruins it, because I might already be there, and Wes is 100 meters short of getting to the center of the cloud, and I'm looking at him like, I wish he was 100 meters up, because then we could just make that decision, bang, and move on and be really efficient. So that's just the take-home point, is if you're flying with mates and you're both going in the same direction, try and get side to side, and maybe, I don't know, depends on the day, but like 50 meters, 100 meters apart, something like that. That would be good. And then ground sources and clouds, yeah. So I'm always trying to link up what is triggering for that cloud. And I don't know, maybe who's got some favourite triggers?
Well,
Recently cut
Cut fields? Yeah.
ground fields that are dry,
There's
towns.
Solar panels.
Building site, solar panels has been a really
solar
good one.
And the,
Especially
and
just over the
tunnels
river
as
over
well,
there.
the
Polytunnels.
polytunnels.
Polytunnel's pretty good.
Car parks are nice.
Car parks,
And the river
Rapeseed
sometimes.
oil,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
yellow fields, they've
When you
been
get
really
to the
good.
river, it's windy enough.
Changes in height and changes in terrain,
Yeah.
edges.
Yeah,
Very
that's
good.
true as well. Or
Yeah.
really flat ground and then a tree line.
Yeah, that's a good edge.
Yeah, good. I guess most people know about that kind of stuff, but I just thought if anyone's got any good unusual ones. Caravan parks have been really good this year.
Mm.
Yeah. And at which point, that's what else I want to say, was at which point do you go from flying the clouds or flying the triggers? And normally as a rule it's kind of like halfway to base. If you're lower than that, yes, you're still looking at the clouds, but you need to start to be looking down a bit and looking at the triggers, because you're in the lower half of the air mass. And if you're high, then normally you just bounce cloud to cloud till the cloud dies on you, which inevitably will happen, and then you're back into that lower layer and looking for the triggers. Good. Okay, so now then, this is going to be a little bit about safety and some little tips that I thought might be useful. So I think everyone here has a different level, probably, and so it's really good to think about and identify what the safe flying conditions are for you. So for more experienced pilots, like Ken, maybe the most experienced here.
That's been quite a while. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, the
Not
conditions
very
might be different to some of the newer pilots, or what is okay to fly
Of a
in.
disservice.
And
But not flying.
it's just important to say that, you know, safety is the number one thing, because if you get hurt, you're not going to fly for a while, and that's not good. So just take care of yourselves, and it's never a bad thing to say, I landed just to be safe. I wasn't comfortable or wasn't feeling it, something like that. That's fine. I mean, there's times this year where I've landed and just gone, you know what, that was a bit too much, and now I'm happy to be on the ground. So nothing wrong with that. So then, I don't know, how many people here have been on SIV? Okay, about half, yeah. And enjoyed it?
Yeah.
Are you scared or
No, fun.
no?
Yeah.
Fun?
Fun.
No, not
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
I enjoy it.
Yeah, everyone has fun, right, Ken?
No.
Yes.
I enjoy it.
I had to go in the darkened room and drink a
Yeah,
bottle
yeah.
of wine. It was in the afternoon.
I didn't get SIV for that.
Did anyone get twisted on the SIV?
Yes, I did.
And what happened?
Oh, it was just that I didn't bend my knees.
Didn't bend your knees?
So I twisted and ended up right way around and facing the other way. So I just had to untwist, yeah. But it was, yeah, that was why, because when I came out, I hadn't thought to bend my
And
knees. So
did it start to go into a spiral when you were twisted or anything
No.
like that? It didn't.
No, it was fine. It was a high MB. I was on, so it
So-
was very kind.
One of the most dangerous things that can happen if you're twisted is that you're not sure which brake to pull, and then you end up going into a spiral because maybe you get twisted with some weight shift locked in or something like that. Sounds like you're okay, Peggy.
It was fine, yeah. I just grabbed it above,
Yeah.
above the twist and
Yeah.
pulled it back round.
Wait, the two burgers?
Yeah, they're on the way.
That's exactly what I want to say, Peggy, was that the best reaction for if you're twisted, if it ever happens to you, just think, bin your brakes, let go of your brakes, and reach above the twist and take the main brake lines in each hand. And then if you're in some kind of spiral configuration, you'll be able to pull the right side just to get yourself flying straight again. And only when you're flying straight again, think about untwisting. So just bin the brakes and reach for the brakes above. That's the most important thing. Because if you try and do it and you twist it however many times, it's very difficult to know which side is which in that situation. If you get a small cravat, what do you do?
I had one actually at the front on Sunday.
Okay.
Right in front of the hill.
And what did you do?
It was a small cravat. Well, I looked at it first.
Good, good.
And then I just pulled the stabilo, and it
Okay.
actually popped the cravat because it was a line over it.
Mhm.
So it popped that out, but it kept the tip in, funny
Mhm.
enough. So then I just popped the tip out.
Mhm.
It's fine.
That's what I would say. I would say that I've never had a cravat that I've got out with a stabby line. I mean, if you've got a very small cravat and you get it out with the stabby line,
Well, I tried to put. Sorry, I did try to pump it out to start
Yeah.
with, and it didn't come out
Mhm.
because So I had to. I think I'd hit the edge of the thermal. Like I
Okay.
hit the edge of a strong thermal, and it bashed in, and then stuck a cravat in when it sort of popped out a bit. And so I tried to pump it out and realised that it was tucked in, so pulled it out with the stabilo line, and
so
then
you got a bit out with the stabby.
but then it didn't. The actual, it's just then to pump inflate the wing. I thought it would come out that way, but it didn't. But I was really low on the hill, so you saw
Yes.
it, yeah. Just on Sunday.
But I mean, personally for me, it's if you're comfortable with it, is to pump it out with the brake. You'll be much more efficient and be
I
more in
tried
control.
it, but it didn't
Yeah.
come out.
Mhm.
It was funny because that was the first thing. I thought,
It's normally
it was tucked in.
it's normally quite a deep pump.
Maybe I didn't. Maybe I
You
didn't.
just
give
hold it for a
really-
very short
yeah.
amount of time
I
and
didn't.
then release it.
I was really low, close to the hill,
Mhm.
and I'm like, no, I'm just gonna
Yeah.
get this out.
In that case, the best thing is directional control. As
Yeah.
long as you've got your headings fixed
Yeah.
first before you try to.
It was on the outside, so it was okay. But yeah.
So not relevant for everybody, but for people who are flying more two-liners, I think. Greg, you're on two-liner. Yeah, then pumping out the stabby is quite normal. So what's the most important thing to do on a strong wind takeoff?
Not have a barbed wire fence behind you.
No, we have some answers apart from Peggy.
Well, that's frosty.
Oh yeah.
So, in my opinion, there's going to be different answers, and that's fine. But in my opinion, the best thing you can do in a strong wind takeoff is to run at the glider.
Yeah.
When you put it
Yeah.
up, because it's
Yeah.
going to give you time. So many times I've seen people just pull the glider up, freeze because they're like it's windy, and then you just get plucked up and dumped on their ass in the wind. Or in the worst case, you get plucked up, twisted, and then you twist even the wrong way, and that can be quite catastrophic if that goes. So run at the glider, that'll give you time, take the energy out of the wing. It's things that you know, I think, but it is good to remind yourself sometimes. So I appreciate that. And then for the landing, when we were landing in Korea for the testing, a lot of the time we'd be landing in pretty windy conditions, or top landing in very windy conditions. And when you're top landing on, say, a knife edge ridge, you don't want to kill the glider by going on the brakes, because it's just going to lift you up and dump you into the lee side. So what we do is, as soon as you get a metre off the ground, is just grab the rear riser and haul that in as hard as you can, and try and spin around and then run at the glider. Again, run at the glider. Or if for a more controlled landing, if you've got some space behind you, what I like to do in a strong wind landing is as soon as you touch the ground, is you pull one brake, you get the glider going off to one side, and then you kill it as running sideways to it, instead of trying to kill it and it's pulling you straight back. So that's just a
Not too
little,
reversing.
Yeah, cheers.
yeah.
Can you glider in strong winds? When I was out in the US flying 15, 20 years ago, some of the pilots out there were advocating high wind landing on taking one side braking, but taking the A's on the opposite side. So kind of that one. Have you any views on that? I never got to grips with it, so I don't use it.
Yeah, I never got into that either. I tried a few times both A's, just to front stall it, but I don't. But I don't.
It's going to make you inflate at some point.
Yeah, I'm a bit worried that it's going to really re-inflate, and also it's a very strange feeling that you just suddenly unload the glider like that, and it just something. It's too many chances of something weird to happen.
What I do is, if I'm going backwards, is I get my legs moving like this, and then I just literally as I land, I let my legs completely collapse, and then I jump up, and then just bury the brakes, and that
Okay.
works really well.
So you kind of unload the wing.
I unload the wing, and
Yeah.
then you can brake. You know,
Okay, I'd like to see that.
it works.
No, I think it would work. I think it would work.
It's a recommended way.
Oh really? I never heard of it. Oh, it sounds good.
Okay, that's what I do.
Good.
Yeah, you get your knee replaced when you just said?
5 weeks.
And then a last tiny little mention of just wing selection and two-liners. So I think, how many people here have flown two-liners? You have flown? Greg, 3 people, is it? Never?
Yeah.
I'm missing that. Well, I mean, I'm a little bit biased because I've been flying two-liners a lot, but it's day and night difference between flying a 3-liner and a 2-liner.
It's cheating.
It's cheating. It is.
Even Paulson.
It's not fair.
It doesn't want to come down.
They don't want to
Yeah,
come
and
down.
some on the blow range, you didn't lose any height whatsoever.
No.
And also the feedback is much more intuitive on a 2-liner. So if you've got any aspirations for, I would say, flying a long time and flying competitively, or trying to get the best performance possible, then you want to have an eye eventually on stepping up to a 2-liner. But I would say at the same time, what I personally was like, I flew a B for 200 hours until I moved up to a C-wing. It just, there's no rush to do it at the same time. It is a beautiful thing to do, is to fly a 2-liner, is to fly a 2-liner after flying a 3-liner, but you know, there's no hurry at the same time. So take your time, put your hours in, maybe go on SIV or talk to people who have been on SIV,
Definitely.
just not Ken, and get the positive experiences. And yeah, just move along.
Can you do
slowly.
all of the maneuvers on the 2-liners on SIV, or you are limited to certain because you obviously have 2 sets of
In
lines?
theory, you should be able to order the collapse lines and fit them to your 2-liner to do the collapses. You can pull some collapses without folding lines, but they're going to be maybe a little bit more dynamic. But the thing is, you don't want to.
The thing is,
You don't want to drag out your 2-liner.
because you don't fly with your collapse lines when you're flying.
No, I mean, true, yeah.
So you can do maneuvers on glider you
If you
don't
want to,
fly.
I would say if you want to do collapse testing, then take a 3-liner. For that SIV,
Okay,
or
it's
for one
just
day
more
the
to
SIV,
kind
or
of
borrow a C-wing.
Okay.
Or even a B, even step down to a B-wing, because you can get nice collapses and the reactions are the same. And nothing's going to go wrong.
I guess a lot of people are waiting with the idea that there'll be a 2-liner, a C 2-liner, rather than a D.
Yeah. Quite.
So I think certainly people I know are waiting for that. They're interested in 2-liners, but you talk
Yeah,
to
that's
people.
going to be cool though, because I think a lot of people, it'll make it accessible
Yeah,
to a lot of people. And
Yeah.
people go, oh,
I think there's also a difference in 2-liners. I mean, having flown even this year through three different 2-liners.
Yeah.
So I've had sort of 4 years or so on a Zeno, best part of shitload of hours. Well over 400 hours on a Zeno. Got the Leopard, didn't quite dial into that. Got the Zeo Light. My Zeo Light is just a dream to fly, even compared to the Zeno. It's so much easier. And I think the workload on the Zeo Light is a lot less than the Zeno, and massively less than the Leopard.
What was the safety test like?
Huh?
What's the test report like on it?
What, on the 0?
Yeah. Zero light. And it's normally accelerated flight, it's the most
Yeah.
scary bit, isn't it?
But I definitely find it on just general flying, well, thermic flying,
Yeah.
the workload is where I was like on my Zeno, I was so used to what it would do, given a strong thermal, or say the edge of a strong thermal or something. I knew what it would do, and I would, I'd be on the toggle waiting for it to happen. Zero light, it just doesn't happen.
What were you waiting for to happen?
So the movement in the wing, and if I'd be sort of just controlling it off in the because I fly an awful lot just on the toggles, and with the movement in the wing, just sort of stopping it pitching forward and stuff. Even on the zero light, I found that I just don't get that movement that I was used to on the Xeno. And I just find the work better. So my experience with two liners is, well, I think even ozone say the zero light is now the entry level two liner. They used to say that about the Xeno, didn't they? There's a step to the end.
Compared to an Enzo.
Yeah, exactly. It's compared to the Enzo, and now I think it's a zero light. So if you're going from a three liner to a two liner, pick which one you go to. Don't go straight for an Enzo. That's what I would suggest.
So what's the aspect ratio of your zero light? Because I guess they've got to be at least 7.
It's
Two liners.
6.7. It's less than the Xeno.
Okay, right.
Complete different wing.
Yeah.
Less cells, a lot less cells in fact. So I think the Xeno's 78 or something.
But they charge the same money.
No, it's less. About
No.
grand less.
Okay, right.
From this price.
But the delivery is still the same.
Yeah.
at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. So that's about all for the presentation. Was there any questions on any of those topics, or any other questions?
Yes. You know I was going to ask you something.
Well,
What I was going to ask you is, you spent, thanks for coming, obviously, thank you very much. And you spent, 16 years as a test pilot and a comp pilot. And then you've come back to the UK with all that experience, with the head in here on comms and testing. And then you've come back to UK XC flying. How, which do you prefer? Is there a difference which you prefer? And how did you transition your thought? Is it difficult to transition your do you know what I mean? Your thought pattern on the flying, or you like rushing to goal to get into goal, or you like I know you still do that on XC. When you got a goal here, but it's a different. So was it difficult to sort of to go from one to the other? Because then you've been to comps this year as well, haven't you? So then you switch back. It's a different mindset, is it not?
It's a little bit different mindset. Yeah, in the comps, what I noticed was that I was feeling more conservative on the final glide to goal, because normally in Britain for the cross country flight, the time doesn't matter so much. So you're like, oh, I want to be as high as possible to make sure I make it. And then in the comp, I was like, oh, less than 100 meters over goal. Oh, that's a little bit tight.
Was it difficult, like when you got back and you sort of come out and start with the gang, pushing and doing all this sort of flying?
No, I don't think it was too difficult. I mean, it took me a while maybe to get clued into UK flying.
Yeah, well that's different, yeah.
But the pushing side is similar. I mean, you push a bit less in cross-country flying, I would say. But still, I think from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, I changed quite a lot. Especially since in the beginning of the season I was flying a C-wing, and as I was waiting for my two-liner to come, and then now I've got the Enzo, and everything's a lot easier.
Yeah. Sort of noticed that really.
So
Nice time out there on the beacon with you that day.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah, there's been some nice ones indeed.
But
no, not really. I wouldn't say coming from the testing mindset to cross country. I didn't do a lot of cross country.
no, so therefore you've come to cross country, is it?
Yeah.
Something like
So it was getting more dialed in to watching the cloud cycles again and relearning which triggers are working.
Because when you're in a comp, there's so many around you, surely as well, that you're sort of like, oh, they're all going up over there. Whereas you're sort of doing a lot more of that. Yeah, because you're sort of leading out all the time, aren't you?
Much more decision making.
It's like it is, you're leading.
Which makes it really fun.
Yeah.
Because even if you messed up, in a comp, if you messed up, you're behind, and then you don't need to make too many more decisions apart from how you're going to catch up. In terms of route choice and stuff like that, it's limited. But in a cross country, even if you messed up, you get low. If you get up again, you're still you have to make another decision. So it's very good training for that. I would say.
And a smaller gaggle.
Yeah, and a smaller guy.
What I noticed is you're normally the first person to take off.
Yes.
And, well, a couple of times I've seen you take off, I hadn't seen what you'd gone for.
Mm.
And you I think it was a light wind,
Mhm.
it was a sort of very northerly, maybe northwest.
Mhm.
Whereas what you did was you took off and you basically went down the ridge, I don't think you even turned, and then you just dropped over the back.
Mhm.
So, and it was quite early.
Yeah.
You know, we were all expecting to be flying maybe an hour and a half later. So certainly your approach is much better.
Mhm.
Did you take off on the basis that you could just nip over to the
Yeah.
east side? Okay.
It wasn't very strong west wind. That climb seems to be almost always there
Where's that?
on the east
Building
side.
side.
On the east side. Well, yes, the building side, but quite often there's also the climb. You know, on the first
On the spur.
like vertical bit
Yeah,
where the
yeah.
city comes to
Yes.
the east side,
Just
And
and
That's
then
the
it
way
slopes, and then it slopes up a
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we take off up here on the east side, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So quite often, first aim for that bit. If that doesn't work, then yeah, it's building site, city, or on one day showground. And, yeah, but it's also been a little bit of a scary, a bit of an issue for me is that I always want to take off first because I feel like we're missing out on a big portion of the day. Especially
Yeah.
when you try and do a triangle, it's good to get going early, or to any flight, you want to get going early because you don't know what's going to happen.
But
So,
for the rest of us, us mere mortals, we're looking for a sign.
yeah.
There might be birds,
Well,
it
on
might
that,
be a cloud forming.
on that day there was already clouds popping over the town.
Yeah. But we're on the wrong side.
Yeah, easily fixed. With a two-liner, it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
Because I know I'm going to have the glide. Even I was thinking, I think on that particular day, I maybe got a little bit of lift, and then I was like, should I search more on this west side? And I was like, no.
Yeah, you
because-
didn't drop much.
Yeah. Yeah, because it was always in my head that I'm just going to jump over this side.
So many of us have, tried the takeoff relatively early when we see clouds coming on the west side, and I would say 95% of the time we're down in the field and thinking, can we bother to walk back up the hill again?
Yeah, it is tricky. I mean, I am always...
Actually, most of the time we wait for Tony to do that.
Mhm.
Then we know that phase is over.
Right, yeah.
It's only 2 minutes late.
I think 10 minutes later, they
10
take
minutes
off.
later.
We
Sometimes
tend
it
to
is.
wait for him to land first.
Yeah, once it's in the ground.
Yeah.
Once he's safely down, then we'll
And
take
I'll
off.
run around and knock off a thermal for you.
But I would say, like, any time, as soon as I'm clipped in and ready to go, I'm always kind of slowly and boring scan left, right, up, down. Is there a bird? Come on, just show me a bird and I'll go. That's all I'm thinking is like, just give me a sign. And then as the time goes on, and I'm like, okay, it's 11:30. I'm sure I could have taken off. If I had the balls, I could have taken off 20 minutes earlier. And you know, I'm kind of kicking myself a little bit, and I'm looking, and I get more frustrated. And then maybe if I see a really nice cloud where I'm like, okay, it's just got to work, then I might just go for that.
It's early for us because we tend to look at RASP.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and RASP we say
Mm-hmm.
perfect time is 1 o'clock or something. So we're all waiting for a sign or the perfect time. Exactly 1 o'clock, take off.
Thank you. You reminded me one point maybe I missed earlier was when I'm planning a triangle, I will almost always make the first leg kind of with the downwind component, even if it's light wind. Try and
Okay.
make the first leg with the downwind because because in case it's windy and then you can just bugger off downwind. That's one point. But the main point is that when you start the triangle, if you're anything like me, I'm going to try and take off early, and that's around 11 o'clock, between 11 o'clock and 12, and that's when you're going to have the lowest base in the day, and the most tricky conditions, probably, hopefully it's going to get better, and then any time that you're drifting with the wind, at least you're going in the right direction. So even if you have to take a weak climb with a low base, which is quite likely early on, at least you're gaining ground. So the earlier you can take off in that case, the better it's going to be for your whole flight, because if you can already have done 10k before 12 o'clock, I always count that I always then look at the time and I'm like, okay, it's 12 o'clock, I've already done 12k, that's just like free, it's 12k for free, basically, and in an 80k triangle, it's really a good advantage. So that's why I always set it whatever the downwind would be, unless something else obvious happens, like the clouds are popping off that way. Something like that. So, sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess Brian Hindle, which is always the triangle guy here, he would always say, I'm not arguing with you on this, I understand what you're saying, but he would always say the last leg should be with the wind, because you're probably going to be late, and again, it's all dropping off. It's the same sort of thing, but
It's
you're
coming
an
out from the
advantage.
different angles, from the different
Yeah,
sides.
yeah, the advantage are you're probably at base when you're doing that last leg. And certainly when we've done that last leg is a piece of cake with the wind.
Yeah. Especially if you're coming into restitution as well.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
right.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right.
It
It doesn't
doesn't
change
change
the fact
that
the
on the
first
inside.
leg's
Yeah.
probably the hardest.
Absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
And then that's the thing, if you had this first leg, say, into wind or crosswind, and it was, you're trying to go early,
Marginal.
Yeah,
you're going to have to do crosswind glides early, which is like,
yeah.
it's not nice.
And I guess we're basing our logic on starting much later as well.
Yeah. So it's good. I mean, both ways can work, but you have to, as long as you can see the merits in both plans.
Yeah.
You know, then it's fine.
Well, the most important thing is to get up in the first place, isn't it?
Mhm.
If you don't do that, then
Yeah, that helps. Yeah. So, any more questions?
Yeah, I've got one on more on the actual your job with Jim.
Mhm.
How you got into design and working with that.
A lot of luck, basically. Yeah.
That's what a lot of people say.
Yeah, so the reason I got the job in the first place was pretty much I was quite young and in the British competition kind of let's say circuit, you know, going to the British Championships and stuff like that with no money. And as you know, normally the average age of parallel pilots is a little bit above ourselves. So as the youngest, everyone can... No. Sorry. As the youngest, basically people were really supportive of me, and one of the people that was really supportive was Adrian Thomas, who's a professor in biology and aerodynamics in Oxford University. And he basically said, what do you want to do after university? And I was like, I want to go flying. And he said, okay. So he then corresponded with Jim, and to my surprise, he then contacted me and said, okay, you should get in touch with Jim. So I got in touch with Jim, and Jim said, oh, come out for 3 months and see how you like it. And I did, and then I stayed there about 6.5 years. So. Yeah, and then, so initially it was just as a testing role, but I was always really interested in the design side as well. So in the first couple of years, I would quite often in the evenings sit next to Jim as he's doing the design in the evenings, and just ask him all the stupid questions I could think of, really, and then just learn by doing. And eventually I was helping him and doing a lot of the more menial work, you know, there's a lot of boring jobs to do with the design side, and he would say like, okay, just change that, and then show it to me. So I would do that and learn it like that. Yeah.
So how do you design a glider? I mean, do you take the last glider and then try and improve on it? So is it done by sort of, we'll try this and see if we can improve it?
Can
Or is
we
it
do
all on CAD?
that is one approach. Yeah, it's
Right.
all done on the computer.
Right.
And also, so depends. There's a few different approaches. You can take the previous model and try and improve on it,
Yeah.
or you can come up with a radical new idea and incorporate that into some other design aspects that you already know. And quite often you use a combination of things, almost like a modular system. So, say from the boomerang, you might take you know, some ideas that you got from the sail tensioning or the ballooning of the wing,
Yeah.
and put that into the C wing. And then you're going to say, oh, well, we learned a lot about the inlets when we were doing the A wing, you know, that this is better for opening after a side collapse, so let's put that into the C wing. So we make sure the side collapse is really nice recovery. And then you'll take all these little bits, put them in the pot, see what comes out, and then invariably it won't just work from the first prototype, but the software is very good. So the prototypes, when you think about test flying, you think, oh, it's all scary, falling out of the sky. Prototypes, it sounds like a dangerous word maybe, but the software is so good that the prototypes are flying pretty nicely. You know, as soon as you ground handle it, like, there's nothing wrong, it will fly. And then from that, you will need to tweak a little bit, and maybe change some materials.
So did you take sort of Ozone gliders or did you take them apart, try them, try and work out what they've? They've got any-
Not take them apart, but we would have, sometimes, it depends on the models, well, for the boomerang, yeah, you need a reference wing
Of course,
to compare with. We didn't do that for all the classes. It would, like, maybe, I think the C class, we did some comparisons. We borrowed some wing off some pilot on the hill who was like, yeah, no problem, and just do some side-to-side comparisons. But no, we wouldn't take those wings apart.
Right.
So what did it feel like then to go from flying all those dunes to go flying an Enzo? After watching them in the comps all the time.
It's Enzo's a nice glider. It's very accessible. It's very easy for a CCC wing, which is a little boring, I think, because I like a wing that moves a little bit more, but it's the wing to be on, really. Well, this season it's showing maybe the X1 is at least the same, I think perhaps
Is it
slightly
Nibiru?
better. Nibiru, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we'll see with the Boom 12. Boom 12 also looks nice. Very, I think it's
Yeah,
a lot easier to fly looking at the
Yeah, because the
platform.
Boom 11s did have a bit of a reputation, didn't they? I
Sorry?
mean, Boom 11s were a bit, there's some reserves. I mean, Julian
Yeah,
pulled his reserve a few times, didn't he?
his last, yeah, but I think he lost his brake when he was during the collapse, which didn't help.
Oh, that's not going to help. No.
Yeah, but yeah, it's
Mm.
it's different wings for different people. Yeah, I prefer a wing that moves a little bit more, but yeah, well, I was not unfamiliar, let's say, with the Enzo's flying characteristics.
No, I believe that, but it's just, just now you're just out having so much fun on it, so.
Yeah, it's quite stress-free. let's say.
Where do you see the next development coming from in paragliders? So there's been like obviously the breakthrough with like shark nose and a lot of work with two liners, and I see the Boom 12's got the kind of profiled leading edge shape. Where do you think the next breakthrough's coming through? Or is it going to come from more like manufacturing methods? Or do you think they kind of peaked and plateaued? Or is there more to do with the design of the wing?
There's perhaps some. It's all about cost, isn't it? I think it's like if we had Formula One budgets, and you could shape, 3D shape the leading edge, so that there'd be no wrinkles, or have some kind of memory material with memory, so that it would form the leading edge in a really nice way. That would be, so in materials wise, that would be good. In manufacturing sense, there's maybe some things to do with different kinds of heat glue instead of stitching. But again, it's cost and production time.
What sort of tolerances do they manufacture a glider to? Typically, is it plus or minus half a millimetre? Is it less than that? 1/10 of a millimetre? I guess a lot of them are laser cut, which is pretty high precision.
Yeah, it's laser cut.
But
Yeah,
in
but
terms of the
so-
stitching and the seamstress who stitches it together, what tolerances do they abide by, and how are they controlled?
Well, you would do a quality control of, you just check the sewing allowances. So they should stitch everything with, say, an 8 or a 10 millimetre sewing allowance. And depending on the wing, you're going to have different production tolerances. So on the boom, if it's a millimetre out, depends how big this. If it was a big section that was a millimetre out, then this is not possible, because if you have 100 cells and it's a millimetre out everywhere, it's too big a difference for a comp wing. But when you have a Bolero with 38 cells and everyone's a millimetre out, it's
No big deal.
kind of acceptable, yeah. So obviously you'd use the best stitches for the top wings, and maybe the more.
Are they still stitched by hand? Is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
But one place I would like to see, or would be really cool to see leaps in performance, would be in the lines, perhaps. Because at the moment the lines are pretty much cylinder, which aerodynamically is really not the best. If you could make some kind of directional profile into the line,
Teardrops.
It's just such a tiny
that could be a nice step. not just thinking about the glider itself. I think a lot of some manufacturers might be thinking more about the harnesses. I don't know if anybody saw pictures
Oh, yeah,
of
yeah.
super final
Yeah.
submarines
Like a
or atom bombs.
But someone have to launch you, help you launch you, isn't it? Because
No.
no, you can do this.
Ono has a
Okay.
bad leg from frisbee.
Okay.
So guys will have to launch.
So you have periscopes and stuff.
Sorry?
They have periscopes.
I'm not sure. I know. Well, they have a see-through panel to see their instruments.
Okay.
So it's kind of maybe a reverse periscope just to see the instruments. Yeah.
It's not the prettiest one.
It's definitely on the ground. It looks like
Mm.
sack of shit, but in the air it looks okay. Yeah. Just
Okay,
so
okay.
I think it's looking pretty fragile to me.
Yeah,
So I'm
not
really
for
worried
daily
that-
use life.
yeah,
No.
so-
Yeah, submarine, but it did look really fragile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not quite light materials.
So cut off from the environment.
So
Yeah,
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 Isn't
yeah.
it? Well, what's the point?
I was going to say, yeah.
It doesn't
Just
matter.
look at the instrument.
I'm going to have a hood that goes all the way
Make it
in.
look very
Yeah.
Just have a window.
To me, it
down.
looked
So
like
if
it
you
did,
were,
but because it's sort of-
I mean, the impression I got for comps
Yeah.
is they'd almost be on bar all the time, even in thermals.
No.
No, okay.
If you're transitioning, if you're under a cloud and there's a thermal here and a thermal there, and there might be a bit of lift in between, you might want to be on bar
Yeah.
to traverse to the next climb. But when you're thermaling now,
Okay.
no.
Mm.
Any other questions? Was it useful? Is there any? I don't know if somebody's maybe more of a newer pilot and has some question that they think is, more beginner oriented. That's also fine.
Well, I could ask, you mentioned windy and you said you like the webcams. Does
Yeah.
that mean the wind direction forecast is crap, or
I
don't
think so.
like it?
I think it's shit. Yeah, I don't believe it because if there's it seems like with windy, I don't know what other people think, but if there's a chance of rain, it just paints blue all over the map.
Mm.
Even if there's a small chance of rain, so that just makes me. And the wind forecast is so detailed and kind of contrived that I'm like, I don't believe it.
Mm.
So just show me the BL wind, which is the wind at whatever height, not affected by the ground, and that's the general. Okay, let's go with that. But yeah, good question.
I think going back to your comments on ROS, do you ever use the blip spot graphs from there? I tend to use those rather than just another map.
Yeah, I didn't use the ones on RASP, I don't know, I found it a bit clunky, but I was sometimes using XE Meteo.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what it's called, XE Meteo, which gives you the QT chart, just to look a bit.
Where's that? XE Meteo?
Yeah, maybe just somebody could Google it, make sure I got it right. XE Meteo, and then you can put in Great Malvern, Britain, and apparently it will be.
Because it's rubbish on RASP, but I like looking at that because
Yeah,
RASP
this one on XE
never
Meteo,
forecast top cover.
it looks a little bit cleaner. It's only giving you the
Doesn't
lines
seem
and
to
everything,
anyway.
but yeah, RASP has a bit of a problem with top cover.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a bit of a problem with low pressure days, I would say.
Yeah,
It always overvalues low pressure days, especially in Wales where it almost always rains. So it's always saying like 5 stars, there we go, off you go.
Yeah.
It's like, are you sure?
yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't look not to do with.
But yeah, XE Meteo I would look
Oh,
at
I
a
haven't
little
got the
bit
signal.
just to see the quality of the climb at different altitudes, but at the end of the day, it's not the most important thing.
Yeah.
If the base is good, the wind is okay, it's probably okay.
Yeah.
So where are you going next? Go and find another, go test pilot and something. Well,
Yeah, I would like to stay in the industry.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
Well, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Idris.
Mhm.
Thanks for
No problem.